Can someone truly be harmed using dark magic, spells, rituals, or curses? Many people not only believe it, but sometimes turn to mystical practices themselves, usually for protection rather than to hurt anyone. Even staunch atheists can be superstitious, which isn't surprising. Magic has accompanied humanity throughout its history. Nowadays, most people encounter it only in movies, books, or folklore. Hardly anyone considers the possible consequences of magical ceremonies and the negative impact these practices can have on a person. A few years ago, the case of 15-year-old Narielle Cacharico Guillen sent shockwaves throughout Venezuela and attracted widespread attention, largely because of a video recorded by the girl's father just days before her tragic death. Over the course of just 3 weeks, she literally withered away from a mysterious illness. Neither doctors nor renowned folk healers could help her. Later, the girl's best friend confessed something that shocked the entire world. Narielle, known simply as Newly to those closest to her, was born in July 2004 in the coastal port city of La Guaira, nestled along the Caribbean Sea. The city serves as the capital of the Venezuelan state bearing the same name. She was the youngest daughter in a modest household, headed by Andrea and Jose Gomez Guillen. Her father worked as a laborer at the local port, while her mother stayed at home, managing the household and raising their daughters. Newly grew up as a bright, joyful, and outgoing girl. She excelled academically and was dedicated to sports, even serving as the captain of her school's volleyball team. Alongside her studies and athletics, she maintained a vibrant presence on social media, where she regularly posted photos, short clips, stories, and motivational content. Her dream was to become a well-known content creator. The city where Guillen was raised is not a tourist destination. Its infrastructure is considered one of the most deteriorated in all of Venezuela. Residents have grown accustomed to frequent interruptions in basic utilities like running water and electricity. The situation has taken such a toll that the local healthcare system has been significantly affected. Many hospitals struggle to operate without steady access to these necessities, leaving them unable to provide consistent care for those in need. Still, shared hardships seem to unite the people of La Guaira, fostering a strong sense of community. Residents did their best to lead fulfilling lives, enjoying small pleasures where they could. Teenagers often threw rooftop parties with music and dancing, using old portable speakers to set the mood. Narielle was a regular at these gatherings and always the life of the party. She attended a local technical college and quickly became one of the most well-known students there. Seen as a rising star in sports, she had a wide circle of friends both in person and online. Her charisma and determination made her someone who could light up any room. In August 2019, Narielle met a young man at one of those rooftop parties. There was an instant connection. Though he was older, 19 at the time, the age difference didn't seem to concern the pair. They hung out several times in group settings before he finally asked her out on a one-on-one date. Narielle was smitten. She confided in her mother, sharing her excitement and emotions. Her parents didn't oppose the relationship. They trusted their younger daughter's judgment, knowing they had raised her well. After all, she was at that age where many experience their first romantic feelings. The identity of Narielle's love interest has never been made public, and to this day, no shared photos have surfaced on social media. The relationship itself was brief, lasting only a few dates. But in a tragic twist of fate, that young man, without even realizing it, would become the unwitting catalyst for a chain of events that ultimately led to the loss of Narielle's life. In September 2019, a young woman named Stephanie Caroline Rodriguez Jimenez unexpectedly entered Newly's life. At 19, Stephanie was attending a different college, but their paths often crossed at local parties thanks to a wide circle of mutual friends. She even started showing up at the volleyball games hosted at Narielle's school to cheer her and her team on. The two quickly became close. Despite their age difference, they formed a strong friendship. Stephanie would call and message Narielle daily, ask about her life, invite her to exclusive events and private parties. She had a knack for getting cheap movie tickets and always knew about the latest cultural happenings in town, even finding her way into places others couldn't access. It seemed like a perfect match. For Narielle, spending time with someone older gave her a sense of maturity. Stephanie often shared her experiences and offered advice, especially about relationships. In return, Stephanie gained popularity by hanging out with the school's beloved athlete and her teammates. It gave her an eager audience and expanded her own social network. Stephanie was striking and knew how to leave an impression. She had a solid following on social media and often gave tips to her younger friends on how to run their pages, what content to post, and how to frame it to get more engagement and likes. By October, Stefani had rented a small apartment just a few blocks away from the Guillen family home. At the time, no one thought much of it. She mentioned she had wanted to move out from her parents' place to live more independently, and it was closer to her school. She quickly became a familiar face in the Guillen household, stopping by nearly every day. She acted warm and welcoming, often bringing over small treats like pastries or candy, and even helping out with chores. Narielle's parents grew fond of her and eventually saw her as an unofficial part of the family. For months, Stefani barely left Narielle's side. She joined her at parties, showed up to her sporting events, helped her with homework, and frequently stayed overnight at her house. Considering how recently they had met and the clear age gap, their closeness raised a few eyebrows. What exactly did they have in common? There was another curious thing about Stefani. She had a deep interest in mysticism and spiritual practices. She claimed her grandmother was a powerful spiritual healer from Cuba and belonged to the Yoruba people, an ancient African culture rich in tradition and beliefs. The well-known Haitian Buddha religion, for instance, evolved partly from Yoruba traditions blended with Christianity. Stefani often wore unusual charms, which she said protected her from negativity, envy, and harmful forces. One of her prized possessions was a small red cloth pouch filled with tiny stones, dried herbs, and bird feathers. It was her personal talisman, something she carried everywhere. She referred to herself as a kind of spiritual guide, saying she had inherited ancient knowledge from her ancestors. According to her, she could create protective rituals, shield people from negative energies, and even help bring success in love and life. This aura of mystery made her seem like a guru of sorts to her younger friends. She frequently talked about human energy and how to work with it for healing and cleansing. Her apartment was filled with mystical items, colored candles, saint figurines, occult symbols on paper, cloth, and stones, and shelves stacked with spell books and ritual guides. When Andrea, Narielle's mother, found out about Stefani's spiritual interests, she grew genuinely concerned. A devout Catholic, Andrea viewed mystical practices as something that strayed far from her faith. At one point, she even considered forbidding her daughter from spending time with Stefani. But after talking things over with her husband and other relatives, and hearing from Narielle herself, she decided it was just innocent curiosity. After all, the family already thought of Stefani as one of their own. If the teens wanted to play pretend with spells and charms, what harm could it do? In mid-December 2019, Stefani proposed something unusual to Narielle and a few other girls. They would perform a cleansing ritual under the full moon. That night, the group headed to the beach, carrying candles and small mystical figurines. Stefani recited short incantations in Yoruba, drew symbols and pentagrams in the sand, lit wax candles, and offered each girl a form of personal protection. Narielle returned home around dawn wearing a strange bracelet, twisted from red and black threads and tiny beads, tied tightly around her wrist. When Andrea saw it, she felt a wave of unease. But her daughter reassured her. Stefani had given it to her as a protective charm and told her to keep it on at all times. Still, Andrea couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. The bracelet looked unsettling. So once Narielle fell asleep, Andrea carefully snipped the thread and removed the charm. When Narielle woke up and noticed it was gone, she was surprised but didn't press the issue. After a quick look around her room, she let it go, assuming it had simply fallen off during the night. On December 23rd, just before Christmas and only days after the moonlit ritual, Narielle and 3 college friends took a trip to the capital for one of the country's largest holiday fairs. The girls had a great time shopping for gifts, enjoying the festive atmosphere before heading to the bus station to return home. That day was blisteringly hot, and the bus was packed. As soon as Narielle stepped off the bus back in Guaira, she collapsed to the ground. Her friends and nearby strangers rushed to her side, helped her regain consciousness, gave her water, called for medical assistance, and contacted her family. Doctors concluded that she had suffered from heat exhaustion, but reassured everyone that there was no serious danger. Narielle was sent home with instructions to rest and stay hydrated. Her parents didn't see any red flags either. She had always been healthy, athletic, and full of energy, rarely experiencing even minor illnesses. The following days seemed uneventful as the family prepared for New Year's. But one thing was odd. Stefani, who had practically lived at the Guillen home, suddenly disappeared. She stopped visiting and wasn't answering calls or messages. Concerned, Narielle and her family repeatedly tried to reach her but received no response. Then, in the early hours of December 29th, Narielle suddenly became very ill. She was violently sick through the night. Her parents, frightened and unsure how to help, rushed her to the hospital at dawn. Once again, doctors found nothing alarming. Her temperature was normal, blood pressure steady, and test results showed no signs of infection or underlying health issues. Even her heart activity was completely regular. With no clear symptoms or diagnosis, the medical team saw no reason to admit her for further treatment. The doctors gave the Guillen family some basic guidance and sent Narielle home, advising her parents to keep a close eye on her condition and make sure she stayed hydrated. But back home, things only got worse. Narielle began trembling uncontrollably. She was so weak that she could barely get out of bed. Dizzy spells hit her constantly, and she refused food, complaining of severe nausea. Andrea tried everything to help her daughter, offering tiny spoonfuls of water, just drops at a time, but Narielle struggled to swallow even that. Almost immediately, it would come back up. Oddly enough, she didn't show any other symptoms that would point to a cold, food poisoning, or another illness. Her temperature and blood pressure remained perfectly normal. On January 2nd, the family called their physician to the house again. The doctor couldn't identify what was wrong, but he was alarmed by how frail she had become and recommended a full diagnostic evaluation at the hospital. However, a complete blood panel, a parasitic screening, an EKG, and other tests revealed nothing unusual. The doctors didn't see any acute concerns, but still advised the family to seek further evaluation at a larger medical center in the capital. Meanwhile, Narielle's condition continued to decline. She was no longer able to eat solid food, and soon she couldn't drink water at all. Her mother called multiple hospitals and private clinics in the capital, but every place turned them down. Either there were no available beds or the staff said they couldn't proceed without a clear diagnosis. Things spiraled quickly. Narielle lost over 11 pounds in just 1 week, a dangerous drop for anyone, but especially for a slender teen. It was heartbreaking to watch. The family doctor could only shake his head helplessly while her parents grew increasingly desperate, unsure how to help their daughter who seemed to be fading before their eyes. By January 4th, Narielle couldn't swallow anything at all and was too weak to get out of bed. Her voice had grown hoarse and unfamiliar, and eventually it disappeared entirely. She could only respond with gestures or a nod. A few days later, even that became too difficult. She started blinking once for yes and twice for no. She couldn't focus her eyes and often stared blankly into space. On January 5th, the doctor visited again and could only confirm that she was suffering from severe exhaustion of an unknown origin. Another round of tests ruled out infections and showed no acute issues. Nearly all her readings were within the normal range, except for a slight drop in her glucose level. Doctors administered 4 fluids to counteract dehydration, but Narielle could neither eat nor drink. Nausea took over every time she tried. There was still no hospital bed available in the capital, and local physicians remained baffled. They simply couldn't explain what was happening. As her condition worsened, her parents began to believe that the cause of her illness might lie outside the bounds of modern medicine. In desperation, they turned to those who specialized in folk remedies and spiritual cleansing, individuals believed to have knowledge of traditional healing and mystical protection practices. On January 6, 2020, Narielle's father recorded a short video on his phone. In the footage, she's sitting in bed, her eyes wide open but completely unfocused, staring into nothing. Her lips moved slightly, yet no sound came out. Her skin looked deathly pale, and her arms and legs twitched erratically like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Jose Gomez sent the video to a distant relative, Claudio Rojas, who lived in another city. Rojas was known as a spiritual healer and practitioner with deep knowledge of ancestral rituals aimed at cleansing and protection. He was often called upon to perform ceremonies to drive away negative forces. After watching the video, Rojas called the Guillen family immediately. He said their daughter was under a dark spiritual influence, something that was draining her life force. According to him, no doctor would be able to help, and they needed to bring her to his community in Carabalita right away, so he and his team could begin the ritual needed to restore her energy. For the desperate parents, Rojas's words sounded like a final lifeline. They left immediately with their ailing daughter and arrived the next morning at the secluded mountain village where Claudio lived. The community's spiritual center was a spacious single-story building with a large hall and a flower-covered altar. Candles burned everywhere, and the practitioners chanted prayers in a blend of ancient languages. Narielle was laid on a stretcher in front of the altar, where 3 individuals led by Rojas checked her pulse and made symbolic gestures over her body. After this initial diagnosis, Rojas concluded that a dark force had entered through her breath and was feeding on her life energy. The ritual to drive out this darkness was to be carried out in 3 stages. The first was a fire cleansing. Narielle remained near the altar overnight, surrounded by dozens of wax candles. Prayers were recited, and she was sprinkled with a mixture of holy water, herbal infusions, and rum. Just before dawn, a live white rooster was waved over her body from head to toe before being sacrificed at the altar as part of a symbolic transfer of the illness. The second day involved purification through cold water. Narielle was carried to a fast-flowing mountain stream believed to have sacred powers. She was immersed 3 times, then wrapped in blankets and returned to the temple. Her damp body was packed with ice and left in the temple courtyard until morning. As extreme as it sounded, the change was noticeable. Her limbs stopped twitching and her breathing became calmer. On the 3rd day, she was anointed with a special herbal mixture from head to toe, then offered a tincture to drink. The belief was that if she could take even a single sip, the cleansing had succeeded and she was on the path to recovery. But Narielle remained unresponsive. Whatever was poured into her mouth simply flowed back out. Despite this, Rojas insisted the ritual had been properly performed, that the dark energy had been removed, and the rest was now in higher hands. The family stayed 1 more night so prayers and herbal smoke could be administered, then left on January 10th to return home with their daughter. While Andrea and Jose Gomez were desperately fighting to save their youngest daughter, the rest of the world faded into the background. They did notice that Narielle's best friend, Stefani, had completely vanished, but they didn't have the strength or capacity to investigate. It was Narielle's older siblings who decided to check on Stefani. To their shock, they discovered that she had abruptly moved out of her apartment despite still having nearly a full month left on her lease. Stefani vanished the very day Narielle stopped drinking even water. She didn't return calls or answer messages. It felt less like she was just avoiding people and more like she had run away. The timing of her disappearance raised serious red flags. She even left behind her personal belongings, which only made her exit seem more suspicious. On the evening of January 11th, around 7:30 p.m., Narielle passed away in her parents' arms. It had been just under 3 weeks since her first symptoms appeared. She had deteriorated rapidly, right before their eyes, and nothing they tried could save her. The official medical report listed her cause of passing as pneumonia brought on by severe physical exhaustion. Because the cause was considered natural, no autopsy was performed and no toxicology tests were ordered. Narielle was laid to rest the next day in a quiet service at the local cemetery attended by only her closest family members. Then on January 14th, Stefani reappeared, reaching out to mutual friends and asking what had happened to Narielle. When the news reached the grieving parents, they tracked her down and confronted her, demanding answers. Pressed for the truth, she finally confessed what she had done. Stefani appeared terrified. She insisted she hadn't meant any real harm and hadn't expected things to go that far. But then she admitted she had placed a spiritual curse on Narielle out of jealousy. The boy Narielle dated the previous summer was someone Stefani had also liked. When he chose Narielle over her, Stefani took it personally. That's when she intentionally began befriending the girl with a darker motive in mind. After gaining Narielle's trust and becoming part of the Guillen household, Stefani began collecting personal items from her friend. She stole a sweat-soaked t-shirt after a sports practice, pulled strands of hair from her brush, took a used spoon after lunch, and even retrieved a bloody tissue from the trash after Narielle accidentally nicked her finger. Stefani brought all of these items to an old cemetery where she performed a ritual and buried them in a grave. This, she claimed, was to bind a spirit to Narielle through a form of symbolic possession, but things escalated from there. Later, Stefani discovered an area disturbed by flooding where she managed to unearth fragments of human remains, bone shards, and partially decomposed tissue. She ground them into a powder, mixed it with cemetery soil, and slowly began adding it to Narielle's food and drinks over the course of several months. Horrified by the confession, Narielle's parents physically took Stefani to the local police and demanded she repeat her story. She did, but the authorities did nothing. Under Venezuelan law, mystical practices like sorcery or spiritual rituals are not considered criminal or administrative offenses. Could she have been charged with something more serious, like intentional poisoning? Possibly. After all, she admitted to feeding Narielle a mixture that included human remains and dirt. But no toxicological tests had been conducted, and the official cause of death was listed as natural. The Guillen family couldn't afford to exhume the body or order a private forensic investigation. Local hospitals lacked the facilities and expertise for such tests. The samples would have had to be sent to the capital, which involved major costs, a months-long waiting list, and daily fees for cold storage of the remains. Without such evidence, proving Stefani's guilt in court was nearly impossible. She walked away without facing any legal consequences. As Narielle's story spread, it became a local legend, fueling theories and debate over what really happened. Four major theories emerged. The first was spiritual. Many locals, especially those who believed in the supernatural, were convinced that Stefani's curse had worked, that a bound spirit had slowly drained Narielle's life through ritual magic. But as mentioned earlier, such practices are not punishable by law. The second theory suggested Stefani infected Narielle with a rare and fatal neurological disease known as kuru, once found among Papua New Guinea tribes that practiced post-mortem ritual cannibalism. But kuru has an incubation period of several years or even decades, making this scenario unlikely. The third theory is considered the most plausible, that by consuming soil and decayed human remains, Narielle may have been exposed to neurotoxins or bacteria that attacked her central nervous system. This could explain her loss of speech, inability to swallow, and tremors resembling severe motor disorders. The fourth theory focuses on a psychological cause. Some believe Narielle's rapid decline stemmed from extreme emotional stress or mental trauma. According to this idea, she may have subconsciously stopped eating and drinking, entering a psychogenic state that led to extreme dehydration and eventually death. Ultimately, the exact cause of what happened to Narielle was never determined. Thanks for watching. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. See you soon.